Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel, and this week my review and thoughts around Battlefields of the Napoleonic Wars, game by Paolo Mori and Alessandro Zucchini. I've done an unboxing video of this game, a new game from a new company, Ingenioso Hidalgo. Again, apologies for my terrible accent. But I wanted to share my thoughts around what I think is an excellent game. It hits and scratches a real itch for me in this period, and I'm really looking forward to playing more. But let's talk to you a little bit about the game, how it works, and then I'll talk to you through some of the scenarios I've done and my final thoughts. So first of all, let's start with an overview of some of the key mechanisms in the game. You've seen hopefully the unboxing. If you haven't, I'll put a link at the end of the video. So let's talk a bit about some of the key mechanisms, show you some of the counters, how they work with the battle board for each scenario, and hopefully that will give you a flavour from there. Okay, so I thought I'd just start by talking through some of the key mechanisms in the game, some of the key things that you use in the game, the counters, the dice, etc., just to give you a flavour. So I've got the battle board, which sits alongside the map for the Austerlitz scenario, which is probably the biggest one in the game. I've played this through myself. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the video. So what you have on the board are some specific scenario rules here. So we've got some factor involved there around the fog enveloping the battlefield, which affects artillery efficiency in terms of ranges and effects. We've got Napoleon having the ability to play a coup de foudre or a lightning strike once throughout the game. So this would generally be with the loss of an order marker permanently for the rest of the game. So it needs to be used very carefully and is a one-shot option. You've got the breakthrough. So on the map, there's two key roads dividing the map into three sections, and if you are controlling all the victory point areas in that particular sector, then you'll get extra victory points when your opponent conducts a rally, which we'll talk about over here shortly. And of course, Austerlitz very much was influenced by the arrival of Davout and his reinforcements, which was part of Napoleon's plan, weakening the right, hoping for the arrival of Davout's corps to support that and hold the Russian Austrian combined forces at bay. So you can see there that if Davout does arrive, then he's got this force here, which will come onto the map. And reinforcements is driven along here. As you can see, when you get to this area, you will roll a dice. If you get a 5+, he arrives. Here, 3+, here he arrives, whatever. So from the French player's point of view, moving the reinforcement marker along is quite crucial again. And again, that only happens in the rally phase. So there's going to be a finite amount of time in the game where Davout is not available, but he will arrive potentially at some point. It's just a case of when, not if. So in terms of the orders sequence, I've sort of mocked up a game here just to show you how this works. So each turn a player will pick up one of his order tokens. In this case, if they've got a command of 4, they'll have 4 each, 4 of these. So up to 4 orders can end up going down here. They'll put 1 down a turn. So we can see that the Russian player in red has already, Russian Austrians have already put infantry columns and artillery, so they've played those in previous turns. The French have played infantry columns, cavalry, and elite infantry, heavy cavalry. So they can't play those orders again until they complete a rally. Similar theme here. When their part of the board then gets reset, they get all their order tokens back, and they can start using them again. So if a player on their turn plays an order, for example infantry lines, they can order any of their units that are infantry lines. They can put activation markers, in this case ×4. It's these little crosses here. They can allocate one to a unit on the table who is in infantry line and give them a move, a fire, or a change formation order as detailed on the board. They don't have to use all of them. They could use 2, for example, and because they've got 2 left over, that would give them the ability, if they're conducting an action like a fire, to potentially include the hazard dice, which I'll come on to again in a moment. So that's generally how the orders work. You'll see there's a couple of other ones down here. Leader ones are quite important. So anything on the leader space or in the squares around the zone around, the leaders can give activation markers to any of those types of units. These are your leaders who will be on the table, French or the Austro-Russian in this case for this scenario. The French start with 2 leaders, and the Austro-Russians start with 3, but of course Davout will count as an additional leader later on in the battle. Maneuver is an interesting order that allows you to allocate activation markers and do a double move. So it's a bit like a strategic move for units, as long as they don't get within the EZOC of enemy units or something that forces them to stop. For example, a terrain rule that would mean they couldn't advance any further. But one of the key things in the game is timing of when to rally, and rally will give your opponent victory points. It will allow you to reform broken units or to change formation and orientation of units using activation markers. So again, you've only got 4 when you play a rally. You can recover then all your order tokens for future turns, check for reinforcements, and you can also reposition any leaders on the table. So lots of things can be done with rally, but of course you're giving your opponent victory points, and potentially you're not able to do anything actively on the table other than reform or recover units. So it's a turn you're going to lose to your opponent. It gives them a double turn in effect. And of course, once you start moving along this victory track, which will be done through rallies, it will be done when you destroy units, it will be done when you capture victory point areas, and it will also be done as we set up here when you've done breakthroughs. Then eventually the counters will move along, and then they get to these 3 white tokens, and as they hit each of these, they will turn them over. And these have been randomly placed down at the beginning of the game, and if you get a green marker, the game continues. If you hit a red marker, the game ends, and then you will assess victory points, victory point conditions to determine the winner at that point. So that's the orders and how they work. Hopefully that gives you a really nice flavour. Some interesting terrain things involved here, and again these are slightly different depending on the scenarios. So depending on whether you've got control, cover, impassable or rough, that will have impact on units and units moving through or into them, what you can and can't do. So again, you need to study that quite carefully when you're looking at the maps and deciding where you're going to move units. And then you've got some of the other key elements in the game, which are the use of dice. So you've got dice for firing, the orange ones, dice for assault, the grey ones, and this unusual one called the hazard dice. So whenever a unit is able to fire, it will fire with 1 or both dice, depending on terrain, etc., formation, things like that. If it spends an activation marker, it can sometimes add in the hazard dice, and the same with the assault. It can add in the hazard dice, or, for example, certain units like your elites sometimes get the hazard dice added in automatically. And the hazard dice is a bit of a gamble, really. It's one of those dice that can have a massive influence on the combat or the fight. It can add a really good advantage, but it can also backfire and cause an adverse turn of events. So you have to decide when is the right time to play that for biggest impact or not. And the dice determine what happens. Each dice has its own little images and things on it. They follow a similar theme. There's lots of retreats if you've got high caliber troops, and of course casualties. So going back to when we were looking at the unboxing video, where we were looking at things like counters, and we're looking at units being made up of 2 of these counters, showing 4 infantry, cavalry, or whatever it might be. In this case, this is a guard cavalry because it's got 3 chevrons on there. And as they take casualties, you'll flip them over and they'll reduce. And it may get to the point where you've got 1 left and they become broken and really can't do very much. And you can spend double activations in a rally to try and add an extra casualty or an extra reinforcement in there to sort of rally that unit, make it usable. But once they're all gone, they're removed and a victory point is given to your opponent. You've also got the ability, as I say, to rally back, reinforce those units. And with guard units or elite units particularly, if you lose those, it has a double victory point impact to the benefit of your opponent. So again, you have to think very carefully when you use your elites, your heavy cavalry, things like that in combat situations, because you can't afford to lose those units. So it's a finite resource, something you have to manage very, very carefully. But hopefully you can already see there's an awful lot of things to be thinking about in the game. It's a simple game. It's not complicated. But what it does, it gives you lots of options. You can never do everything you want to do. But you can do lots of different things. You can try lots of different ways of playing each scenario to see what impact certain things do. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour. The player aids are particularly good that come with the game. You get a couple of these. So again, this sort of breaks down some of those key elements, what dice results mean, artillery and infantry ranges, reactions when you do an assault. Sometimes units can do things. For example, cavalry can retreat in the face of infantry assault, forming square, reaction fire, and then you got your retreat rules, hazard dice results, resolving assaults and fire, and then just some of those key things that units can do. So you can see the benefits that some of the veteran elites have. Light cavalry can move extra. Artillery as well can be very effective. So again, just adding to that flavour of what's available and what you can do. I hope that's been helpful. So hopefully that's given you a good overview of some of the key mechanisms in the game. The rulebook is set out really nicely, full colour. It's very easy to dip in and out of. To be honest, you don't have to look at it too often once you start playing because of the battle boards and the player aid that you've got. I think some of the key elements are just remembering how disorder works and when that happens, and remembering formations and facing as well and how that works. But once you've set up, and the back of the battle board actually has a map of that of the map that comes with the battle board, showing you the setup positions at the beginning of each scenario. So that's really helpful. Once you're up and running and playing the game, as I say, I don't think you'll be looking at this very much. Things I particularly liked in this game, as I said before, were the use of unit types. in terms of lots of the unit types, although they're generic, give you a nice Napoleonic flavour in terms of the things they can and can't do, formations, etc. I'll come back to formations as well in some of my minor issues or grumbles with the game. Other things, I love the battle board, the whole having it on the table there alongside the main game, the map. Everything you need is there. Tells you everything specific to the scenario. Every player can see it. It's very nice and easy. You've got these reinforcement tracks, victory point tracks. It's all visible. Everyone knows exactly where they are. Very, very clever system. I love the orders activation marker system. I think that's really good. Very frustrating sometimes, but again, that's a reality and a good thing, I think, in gaming, to have that friction, that fog of war, which goes on. So I think Paolo Alessandro have done a fantastic job for a new company with new offerings. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do with this game in terms of further scenarios, and because of the way it's packaged and each battle board sort of folder wraps up the individual scenario map, you could collate quite a few in this game box. So I'll be interested to see what the plans are for future scenarios, which will expand this game and give it even more playability. I believe there could be a capture a bra scenario in the offing. So I'm looking forward to talking to Paolo and finding out what else could be in the back of their mind plans wise for the future. I understand this game is pitched at a certain level, and I would say it's pitched at more of a game level than a simulation level. There are some issues for the more experienced Napoleonic player, but that aside, I think this offers a very interesting gaming experience with real Napoleonic flavour. The scenarios are well researched. They're interesting. They're quite different. I've played 2 of the 4 in the box so far. So the Heidelberg 1813, which is a very claustrophobic, quite tight little game, small scenario. And then I've played Austerlitz, which is the big map. Took me quite a few hours to play it, playing solo, but I really enjoyed it. I think the reinforcements aspect is interesting, things coming into play at different points of the battle or not. I think the uncertainty of the term of the battle is really interesting, using these markers. You never quite know when you're going to be able to push the game to a conclusion or not, i.e. the battle. So there's some really interesting things in there, and some really new things in there. Some things I haven't seen in other games. Then there's combinations of things like custom dice that we've seen in other games as well. But it kind of works here. Things that I have issues with, and they're minor. Mainly, again, down to historical accuracy. And I appreciate this game is not trying to necessarily do that. It's an easy to play game that will perhaps encourage non-historical gamers to have a go, which is great. All for that. It's colourful, the artwork is fabulous, the components are really nice. But one, for example, scenario in the game is La Coruna 1809, and so you've got a Peninsular War battle, the British Anglo-Allied forces versus the French. Because of the way the game operates, the orders and generic unit system, the British can only assault in column, and of course anyone who knows their history will know that very seldom happened. It would normally be fire from line and then charge bayonets if appropriate. So I did speak to Paolo about this, and he made the point that it would complicate the game adding in all these extra elements, and I totally get that. But maybe you could house rule that. It's very, very easy to house rule things to your own preference. Or again, in the scenario design, maybe it could have been an aspect of British infantry could assault from line as well as from column, for example, which may have meant keeping them in line more often in line with the way that they would normally fight. Same with Portuguese and units like that. But that's a small thing, and I understand why they haven't done it that way, to try and reflect that order system and how it works on the battle board. It could complicate it, particularly for newer players. But I appreciate for the grognards, they may not like that. You know, I can live with it, but I appreciate some wouldn't be able to. Artillery is effective. It's not massively effective. Is it as effective as Napoleonic artillery would be in a lot of battles? I don't know. Again, with all artillery is kind of treated the same. Again, I understand the reasons for taking a very generic approach, but there was such a broad sweep of foot horse artillery, for example, rockets. You got the 12-pounders, you got 3-pounders, you got 6-pounders, you got Lycorns, you got all sorts of things. But again, I understand you're getting into that micro detail of Napoleonic warfare that this game is not about. It's about allowing you to play a game, to get some Napoleonic flavour, to play scenarios, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes for the shorter one. I probably would say playing solo for the first time Austerlitz took me 3 to 4 hours, but that would probably be nearer 2 when you're playing 2 of you and you know what you're doing. Again, small things. Overall, my thoughts are this is a very, very good presentation. It's very nicely done. It's been well thought out. The rules are very good. There's very few translation issues in there. Bearing in mind this is written by an Italian publisher. A few spelling mistakes, but nothing major. I think that spent a lot of time in getting this right, and you can see it's been a well researched and play tested game. It's not a historical in-depth simulation, but for me, I've been gaming Napoleonic Wars for a very long time. I really liked it. If you can put aside some of the issues that I've highlighted there, I was talking to a friend of mine last night about the Austerlitz game I played, and I said, yes, having visited Austerlitz, played Austerlitz in quite detailed war games, yeah, there's a few things missing there, but I really enjoyed it. It was a really challenging scenario. I felt like I was really there playing the generals on both sides, playing over that Austerlitz battlefield, making those key decisions in key points of the field as well. So, I give it a big thumbs up. I really like the game. I think it's got huge potential. There's so many scenarios that could be added to this game, and as each scenario is its own self-contained thing in its own right. If you don't like a particular scenario, fine, put that to one side, play another one. There's always going to be some choice there. Of course, you get 4 in the box, so you can pick the ones that you like and replay those, and not bother with the ones that you don't like so much. So I think it's one worth having a look out for. If you get a chance and you see it out there, definitely give it a look, and watch this space for more information around this game. Hopefully it will come out there. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. My views, my overview of the game. I'm going to post quite a few pictures of some of the games I've played, just so you can see things happening in action. Just talking about my Austerlitz game in particular. I played it over 3 or 4 evenings, doing a few turns each evening. The Russians were the victors. I found as the French player, I found it really challenging. I felt I couldn't get the centre forward and up on the Pratzen as happened historically. In fact, I got pegged back around Sokolowitz and some of those key areas towards the centre. The as I knew historically, the French held the right and Davout was going to be coming on. As the Russian player, I tended to sit back and let the left stay on the left, looking across at Telnitz and places like that. I didn't push my luck there. I went for the centre and put a lot of pressure on the French. When Davout came on, he was torn between reinforcing the centre or being very wary of the fact the right was still very weak and open to attack. So the French player has some really difficult decisions to make in that scenario. They have some good units, some good guard elite units at the back. And again, I had to commit some of those quite early on. But the Russians got hold of that central point and had all of the full victory point conditions, areas under their control. And they were picking up more victory points on a couple of occasions when the French rallied, which ultimately got them over the line quicker than the French could do. So I'm looking forward to playing that one again. I want to play it 2-player next time, just to see how an opponent would set up and run that. And I think for someone playing it for the first time, I would probably encourage them to take the Russian player in that scenario and give a more experienced player the French. I think the French, as I say, it shows you what a tough battle that was in a lot of ways, and the fact that it could have easily gone one way or the other. But the scenario is very well balanced. I think right up to the end it could have gone either way. There were elements in there where, as the French player, I thought there were opportunities that didn't quite work out. For the Russian player, the same. Heavy cavalry were really interesting. I launched a heavy cavalry attack from the Russian player in one turn, and it managed to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. It got right to the back behind the enemy lines before it then got sort of surrounded by French units and gradually worn down. But it tied up 4 French units. So cavalry used effectively in the game, as in Napoleonic warfare, were very, very useful instrument, but again brittle. High ground, defensive positions offered some real challenges as well. The rivers certainly were a problem in terms of stopping you being able to continue that momentum. So yeah, really interesting game. As I say, hope that gives you a bit more flavour. Here are some pictures. Enjoy that, and hope you enjoy your gaming weekend, and look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon.